Sam Bankman-Fried, the former leader of FTX and Alameda Research, has been arrested and indicted on 12 charges so far, including wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and a campaign finance straw donor scheme. The bank fraud is an especially interesting part of the story because it points to just how desperate Sam was to keep access to the banking system. FTX often did not have access to banks and was unable to get bank accounts in their name, so they often would end up using Alameda Research or Alameda Research-owned entities. This is a common thread through the criminal indictments and the civil cases so far, that FTX didn't have bank accounts, Alameda Research did, so FTX used Alameda Research. Silvergate Bank, since voluntarily liquidated, we did an episode on it, check it out, had rejected FTX's application to get a bank account, but they did end up unwittingly banking FTX. In our video about the recent superseding indictment for Sam Bankman-Fried, we discussed the bank fraud scheme they talk about in the indictment to get an account at Silvergate. This scheme involved an Alameda Research-owned entity called North Dimension Incorporated. This entity looked like it was an import-export business dealing with electronics if you checked their website, but they represented to Silvergate that it was just another Alameda account, but it was actually being used to bank FTX. In another one of our recent episodes where we were discussing the Wall Street Journal reporting on Tether allegedly falsifying their bank records, one of the examples talking about what Tether tried to do was creating a whole bunch of fake invoices and contracts for what looked like an actual business, but would have been Tether and Bitfinex. North Dimension looks very similar to that. It looks like an import-export business, but was actually an account for Alameda Research. Money launderers love import-export businesses because they can create these fake invoices and contracts which match the actual transactions they're engaging in, but don't represent what was actually happening. What makes this especially interesting is that Tether's CFO, Juan Carlo Davicini, and Tether's CEO, Jean Ludovicus van der Velde, used to together do electronics import-export between Italy, Switzerland, and China. Also interesting is that when Alameda needed this new account to bank FTX at Silvergate, they used basically the same cover story in order to get the bank account. Alameda Research and North Dimension were not the only entities that FTX used in order to maintain access to banking. In our video about FTX's activities in Australia, we talked about a small over-the-counter trading desk called HiveEx. HiveEx was started by Fred Schebesta and Frank Restuccia in 2018. Fred specifically is a fascinating character, and I've done videos taking a look at his crypto castle and his TikTok, both of which are hilarious. Fred and Frank start HiveEx in 2018, and then Fred goes out and uses one of his other companies, Lord of W Holdings, to purchase a minority stake in local Australian bank Goldfields Money. HiveEx then begins advertising their ability to get cryptocurrency companies banking, even those who have been rejected repeatedly by other banks. And Fred announces his intention to launch Australia's first cryptocurrency bank. HiveEx even had an executive who was in charge of bank account brokering, presumably in charge of helping these cryptocurrency companies get access to banking. Alameda Research rolls in a couple years later and purchases HiveEx for a mere 300,000 Australian or about 200,000 USD in August of 2020. They immediately make Sam Bankman-Fried director, harpooning his argument that he has no idea what is going on at Alameda Research. And then a few days later, FTX announces they will be using HiveEx as a conduit for banking, harpooning Sam Bankman-Fried's argument that he knew nothing about commingling. However, HiveEx is not even the only example like this. The Financial Times has had some really good reporting on another over-the-counter trading desk in the Sam Bankman-Fried universe, Genesis Block in Hong Kong. Genesis Block was reportedly integrated into FTX and Alameda Research, sharing office space basically, and at Genesis's Block grand opening, they were literally serving cookies with the FTX logo. Furthermore, one of the founders of Genesis Block, Clement Ip, also was a director of FTX's Hong Kong entity. Genesis Block allowed people to exchange their cash for cryptocurrencies and vice versa. And according to the Financial Times, people would line up around the block with bags of cash that they would then exchange for cryptocurrencies at Genesis Block. Genesis Block also ran a network of ATMs that let people swap smaller amounts of cash into cryptocurrency around Hong Kong. Yeah, these are red flag transactions. It arguably gets even worse. Charles Yang, one of the partners of Genesis Block, once discussed in a podcast how Genesis Block maintained a network of 50 to 100 satellite bank accounts, an activity he described as a very gray area. Reporting by Dirty Bubble Media, who we've had on this show before, also listed Genesis Block OTC as one of the clients for Signature Bank in New York, also now shuttered. The similarities here between HiveEx and Genesis Block become quite striking to me. Both seem to maintain bank accounts for cryptocurrency companies, which explains why Alameda Research, FTX, and Sam Bankman-Fried were interested in them. But there's also some other trading firms at the edge of Sam Bankman-Fried's network that also look weird, but I have struggled to figure out exactly how they were functioning. Altalix out of the UK advertises they are your gateway to crypto. They were originally included in the FTX bankruptcy, but have since been removed, and it's still not clear what the relationship is between FTX and Altalix. There's another company called OTC Service AG, which is started in Zurich, Switzerland, which received investment from Alameda Research. But again, it's not clear exactly what they do or what the relationship is. Finally, there's DAG, D-A-A-G, trading DMCC, which was set up in Dubai. This was, and still is, included in the FTX bankruptcy. It was specifically set up in the Dubai Multi-Commodities Center, which is a free zone with very minimal regulations. On the website for the DMCC, they literally advertise that they offer up to 6 visas per office. DAG's contact email at DMCC leads back to Palmetto Investment Group, a Dubai-based venture capital firm that I have really struggled to find additional details on. DAG's listed activities are proprietary trading in crypto commodities. But again, DAG is another example where it's definitely a little bit weird, but we don't know exactly how it was used yet. Broadly, Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX used Alameda Research, HiveEx, and Genesis Block as ways to keep the money moving through the interconnected network. And what is most striking is how similar their techniques were to those reported for Tether and those that are commonly used by money launderers.